Hi everyone. So I just want to give you some tips on how to think about your process analysis essay coming up. So there are a lot of great strategies in the How to Build and Rebuild Trust TED Talk video, which I recommend listening to and watching in full before you watch this recorded video of me talking about the strategies. So one thing I would want you to notice is that this speaker's thesis is at the beginning of the lecture. She immediately says what she wants to talk about.
We can have unprecedented human progress.
So she ends up talking about what her belief is regarding trust. And she has this idea that if we can learn to trust one another more, we can have a lot of progress. And then she poses a lot of questions in her next part of her speech. And that's totally okay to do in your own essay. So, structurally, we're breaking down you want to have a good thesis, you get to use I, you get to use you want to talk to your audience. This kind of language, I want to talk to you about how to build and rebuild trust. That kind of strategy is super direct, but it shows that you're very aware of your intentions and how you want to reach your audience with the kind of idea you have. And then when we get back to the second part, here's where we have the different questions posed. It's just a list of what if questions that gets the audience thinking. And there's a lot of what if you're this, what if you're that. And again, it's using that kind of person address where you're addressing the audience, okay? That's totally allowed in your first essay assignment on process analysis. There are also a lot of different personal experiences that the speaker, Frances Frey, relates to in her TED Talk. You are supposed to be the expert on your topic and the person who's most experienced on your topic when you choose it. So I definitely encourage you to make your topic so unique that you're actually involving your own personal experience. She's using her own credibility to talk about her being a Harvard Business School professor and something that's happened to her. Um, she shares her favorite trait. She goes on talking about going to Uber and this whole situation. So nobody else could tell this kind of how to TED Talk, this how to build and rebuild trust. She's the only person who could write it in such a manner. You want your own paper to be just as unique as her TED Talk is. Um, she goes on and uses a lot of humor. Do you notice where in the TED Talk there are moments where laughter is noted? Humor is okay to use in your process analysis. That is so important to not writing a dry and super, super serious kind of process analysis paper. You should be warned that you'll actually get marked down if you make your essay way too dry and way too serious. It shouldn't read like a textbook. How to do something shouldn't read like a manual, right? It should still be lively and lighthearted, and you get to use a little bit of lightheartedness and humor in between. So her TED Talk is actually super structured, and she thinks about her audience a lot, especially since she's on the stage. She addresses them all the time. She says, I want this, I want that. She's really specific, and she has a lot of structure where she talks about the prescription and she gives a lot of commands and explanation. So here is where she gives a lot of explanation and she talks about the common wobble is empathy. And then she gives the prescription, and this is where she actually gives a command. You get to use this in your process analysis. These are amazing strategies you should think about adapting. Identify where, when, and to whom you are likely to offer your transaction. That should trace pretty perfectly to when, where, to whom you are likely to withhold your empathy. And then she sometimes uses we. We can come up with a trigger that gets us to look up. So that kind of language is super inviting. It's not as hardcore as like giving an actual direct command. It's a little bit softer in language. And there's a lot of if and then this, like cause and effect sort of language too that she uses. So we're kind of breaking down what happens structurally here, the way she uses syntax, and that is something you can definitely borrow in your own writing. She gives a little bit of explanation again here rather than commands, so she breaks up her style. Here she has a little bit of explanation again and a little bit of a cause and effect language here. And then, she keeps using if language. If we consider this, then this. If you have a logic wobble, this can be super dangerous. She's giving us some really interesting warnings, and that's really good for you too. If you have a topic, what would you warn your reader about? What kinds of, things would you say? Hey, be careful. Look at this. Here's a red flag. I just want to give you this heads up, this warning. You can include that as you kind of explain how to do something. It keeps your writing really lively and interesting, and it keeps your writing from seeming overly predictable as we go sentence by sentence or paragraph by paragraph. And she has a good structural list. So she even says like the first wobble is this, the second wobble is this, the third wobble is this, and the third wobble is authenticity. And she explains why that's the third wobble, which is her kind of word of choice, her diction. And then she just directly talks to the reader, right? Or the audience. You don't want to have an authenticity wobble? Be you. Great. And so it's just very natural, very, like just saying, hey, go ahead, be you. So her tone really shifts a lot throughout. She goes ahead and brings back her personal experiences that she's been tempted to, and that she's a woman of super strong opinions with really deep convictions. So feel free to go ahead and do that too. Bring in your own. Everybody in this class who is writing a process analysis paper should be bringing the word I into it. You should be bringing your personal experience into it because you're supposedly the expert on your how to or how kind of topic for process analysis. And then at the end, you'll notice that she gives a little bit of advice. You're definitely welcome to use this as a strategy for your conclusion paragraph. You're also able to you can also consider some things that you might consider. It may have done many things, but it did not create a safe, so just kind of acknowledging cause and effect scenarios, and then figuring out how you want to wrap up with your audience and why your idea is important. So she does a really good job using a range of strategies, which is why I like this TED Talk. And I recommend listening to this first and then thinking about which strategies you want to use in your paper to make it super distinct, very unique, not something that I could just Google online. Like how to be a successful college student is something that's been done over and over and over, for example, as a topic. And you wouldn't want something super generic and bland. You want to bring yourself into it. You want to make it lively. You don't want it to read like a boring, dry manual. You want to think about something that you're really good at, that other people might enjoy being entertained and educated on, and just have fun with it and use really lively, interesting, natural language and get super, super detailed with it, okay? So I hope that gives you some inspiration. Thanks for listening.